Vladimir Putin became acting president of Russia upon Boris Yeltsin's resignation on the 31st of December 1999. He became the leader of a disorganized and chaotic nation, which was still a superpower in terms of nuclear arms, but relied on a relatively small and one-sided economy, which needed reforms and stabilization, especially after the 1998 crisis. He immediately set out to consolidate Russian society and his own power, returning to the traditional Russian solution, the creation of a strong state. Even before his new Unity Party won the election, and he was victorious in the presidential race, a document called Revision Number 6 outlined the main goal, which was the creation of a guided democracy in which information is collected on individuals and organizations, the opposition is discredited, a strong state media is created, control over elections is taken, and Putin's person is linked only to good news. Democracy under Yeltsin was weak and fragile, but now an authoritarian state was to be created. The first task was the destruction of regional elites and the political influence of oligarchs, which had become prevalent during Yeltsin's second term. Putin's election was orchestrated by Boris Berezovsky, one of the prominent oligarchs, but a few weeks later he attacked Putin's reform proposal, then resigned from the Duma, claiming that he didn't want to participate in the restoration of an authoritarian regime. His media outlets, which were not exactly independent either, they just served his personal interests, criticized the new president when the Kursk submarine sank, while he himself emphasized that capitalists like him should interfere in the political process from time to time in order to support democracy against the communists. Putin didn't stop. A previous fraud investigation against Berezovsky was relaunched, after which he left the country and never returned. He gradually divested from his Russian holdings, while other oligarchs like Vladimir Gushinsky and Mikhail Khodorkovsky were soon also targeted by the authorities. During Putin's first term, economic reforms were introduced. These included a flat tax rate, a reduced corporate tax rate, while small businesses received more support, so the overall tax rate was now lower than in most European countries. At the same time, the Kremlin established closer ties with businesses through trade unions and other organizations, so state-controlled enterprises were increasingly run by Putin's former KGB colleagues and political cronies. Essentially, a new group of oligarchs was established, with members who were now loyal to the state and Putin himself. The private sector shrank, but at the same time, the economy started improving. In the 2000s, as oil prices increased, government revenue rose as well, along with real GDP. This made it possible to increase wages, modernize healthcare and education, and introduce new welfare measures. Poverty was cut in half, the middle class expanded, but the country continued to lag behind the West, with certain social classes, like the elderly, being left behind, as social and geographic discrepancies increased. The contrast between big cities like Moscow and the countryside continued to grow. Still, living standards improved, people noticed the change, which maintained Putin's popularity. We can say that he would have remained president even without manipulated elections. Along with the economic stabilization came the re-strengthening of the military and an increasingly aggressive foreign policy stance. Already in 1999, bombing raids were conducted in Chechnya to wipe out the militants who had invaded neighboring Dagestan. A combined air and ground operation was then launched, and by early 2000, the breakaway republic was under Russian control, although its capital, Grozny, was devastated, and a guerrilla war continued until 2009. In October 2002, Chechen separatists took over a Moscow theater, demanding the withdrawal of Russian troops from Chechnya. In the subsequent commando attack, all of them were killed, along with around 130 hostages. Following the September 11 attacks, Putin cooperated with the USA and President George Bush, emphasizing that the two countries were facing the same threat. However, the gradual expansion of NATO remained a thorn in Russian eyes. Putin accused the West of betraying its earlier promises and of undermining Russia's position in Europe. At home, TV stations and newspapers were being taken over by media groups loyal to Putin, but at the same time, military reforms were carried out, creating constant combat readiness units that were manned to wartime standards, while the chain of command was simplified. Peacetime paper divisions were dissolved, quick deployment was emphasized instead. In 2008, since he was barred from a third term by the Constitution, he became Prime Minister, while his close associate, Dmitry Medvedev, was elected president, but this was just a formality. Kosovo's declaration of independence marked a turning point in relations with the West. In the same year, a brief conflict took place with Georgia, in which several cities were occupied by Russian forces, and control over the separatist regions, South Ossetia and Abkhazia, was retained. Russia continued to interfere in internal Ukrainian matters, maintaining close ties with the pro-Russian president, Viktor Yanukovych, while in Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko played a similar role, increasingly looking towards Moscow for assurances. In his two terms, Putin partially restored Russia's position, emphasizing nationalism and conservatism instead of the old and failed communist ideology. Despite allegations of fraud, corruption, and cronyism, his party, United Russia, continued to dominate the elections. Protests broke out from time to time, but the vast majority of the population was still pleased with Putin, although the consequences of the 2008 financial crisis eroded his popularity. It became evident that the Russian economy was not any better than before. It simply enjoyed higher oil prices, with which the government could raise living standards. Without that, the country stagnated, real incomes decreased, and this could only be countered by raising the retirement age and taxes. Not that Western countries have been doing much better in this regard. Still, Putin won the 2012 presidential election, after which protests broke out once again, accusing the government of vote rigging. Russian-American relations reached a new low in 2013 when Putin gave asylum to Edward Snowden, a CIA whistleblower. The two nations continued to clash in Syria, not directly, of course, but they guaranteed the continuation of the civil war, while America cited problems with human rights within Russia. Stricter legislation against the LGBT community came next, which officials called a ban on the propaganda of pedophilia and homosexuality. The following year, after the collapse of the Yanukovych government in Kiev, the decision was made to occupy the Crimean Peninsula, which was carried out in March and completed in a single day. Soon, two regions announced their independence in eastern Ukraine, widening the conflict, which continues to this day in the form of a full invasion. I have already talked about that in another video. The initial operation boosted Putin's popularity, and the ongoing war has yet to ruin it, despite Western claims to the contrary. In 2022, it seems that Russia has returned to its roots with a centralized government that values the projection of military power. Economic and social considerations are less important, as they always have been. Throughout Russia's history, guns were always preferred to butter, which can be explained with foreign invasions and an almost paranoid fear of military and political collapse. I would say that the appearance of Putin was Russia's answer to the chaotic and tumultuous 90s, during which foreign interest trumped patriotic sentiments. What we see today is a great power trying to recover its own sphere of influence and dominate it with limited success. A lot depends on who comes next after Vladimir Putin, but we should not expect a dramatic change. Thank you for watching. See you next time.